business have always been around buying into or buying companies. So in all of the different businesses that I've been in, it's been investing into or buying companies. Some of them highly leveraged, and some of them, collectively to add them together to roll out programs, or a whole bunch of other different mechanisms. But in the very beginning of 1996, I had the tremendous privilege of joining Babcock and Brown, and I think I was employee number 17 at the time. And it was a partnership which about half the people were in Australia and half were in the US. At the time, the headquarters was in San Francisco. And it was a structured finance house. They were doing structured finance around aircraft leasing and project finance for major, not so much infrastructure, but it was mines and big power stations and things like that. And it was an amazing experience. And it was a fantastic roller coaster. I spent almost 13 years there. And I grew up with the company, really, and enjoyed it. Just to give you some kind of stats to show you what had happened. So, I think 17 people in Australia, maybe 40 people worldwide when I joined. We got to the 2004 and we listed, and our IPO market cap at the IPO price was $1 billion. And by then we had 250 people or so. And it happened with a big fanfare and perfect timing, and the headlines were all out there, and success was written all over us. And the $5 shares came on at $8 immediately, and they ran really hard to about $12 within a week or two. And then from 2004 up until 2007, so only 3 years, maybe 4 years if you middle and late years. We grew tremendously well. We hit a seam of gold in a market that was running, where the services we were offering were perfectly timed. Not sustainable, but perfectly timed. And the banks were lending it to us up until about mid-2007. And that was the first of the tremors in the debt market. And so after we bought these funds, what we were doing, because we didn't want to dilute our own shares, what we were doing was we were borrowing up to buy the assets under our balance sheet and then selling them into the funds that we had. So there was a moment in time when for each acquisition, you had an awful lot of debt on your balance sheet before you could sell it down into the funds, either with debt or equity in the funds. And so through the second half of 2007, leading up to December 2007, we were involved in a bidding war, which became, who's got the biggest member. But it was an unfortunate circumstance. We were bidding against Macquarie, and unfortunately we won. We closed the deal in December. It was for a company called Alinta, which had power stations, gas pipelines, and some transmissions. And the bidding price was $7 billion, but it came with $7 billion of debt as well. So we had to fund not only the 7 purchase price, but also absorb $7 billion of debt. So onto our head company balance sheet went $14 billion of debt, day one. Just as the debt crisis hit. Just as CDOs started shaking the markets, just as the securitization market began to dry up, and the whole of the financial system came to a grinding halt. And John Stewart, who at the time was the CEO of National Australia Bank, put it really well. He's a very dry, wry Scottish fellow. And he said, you're in a room full of people, and you're going around networking, and you know that all but one of these people are fantastic, and you should be doing business with them, shaking their hand. But you know one of them has a terminal communicable disease. You just don't know which one. So the answer is nobody's going to shake hands with anybody. And the debt market just came to a grinding halt. So here we were with $14 billion worth of debt, plus whatever working capital debt we had on before. And even when we pushed it down into the fund had no way of refinancing the debt. So that was when, already in late 2007, Alco had gone under, and then MFS was struggling again under the same kinds of things. And one of the benefits of having heavy employee ownership, which was a policy of ours, our staff owned about half the company when we listed it, and we ended up owning about a third of it when it died as well. But it meant that, theoretically, the interests of staff are aligned with investors, and you're committed, and you get paid mostly in shares and those kind of things. That all works really well, but it means that there's very little liquidity in the market for non-employee shareholders, and so the short sellers started having a field day, and they also knew that many B&B employees had taken out loans to buy more shares or to go into listings of spin-offs. So there were margin calls, and they knew the shorts knew if they hammered the price down far enough, then the banks would make a margin call, and they would dump the stock, and the stock would plummet until they hit the next target level. So this became a game. And there's a law in Australia that says you're only allowed to short sell 10% of the stock at any given time. Well, at one point in time, 90% of our available stock was shorted. And the regulators wouldn't do a thing about it. And then the hedge funds who were doing it would have a concerted attack. So they would phone around and say, Thursday we're going to go after Babcock and Brown communities. And then Tuesday and Wednesday, they would plant articles with the journalists who could be bought. And some terrible headline would come up on Thursday morning saying, I don't know, hidden debt trigger clause rumored to be in this entity. And the price, people would start selling, and then the shorts would pile in, and then the margin sellers would call and pile in, and these things would get trashed. We just watched, we had about a dozen listed, and they just went one after another, bang, 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 all the way around. And this is just an awful time where I think we were in the newspaper 4 out of 5 days in every week for 4 months. Not a single positive article either. And we had, it actually was really terminal because we had, actually let me come back and tell you about the really dark days, and let me just go and tell you a little bit about my job at B&B and the lead up to it. So when we listed in 2004, we consolidated 27 different divisions into 4 because the market couldn't understand 27, and not agree, but in a partnership, every partner gets to do his own thing. So we consolidated all this, and as a result, we had these kind of mega divisions, and it sort of management. And in corporate finance, which is the one that I was kind of involved in, there were a whole bunch of residual assets, investments and things that we built up over a number of years. Some of them were small, some of them were leftovers, fees, or things like this. Some of them were stakes in public companies where we expected to make money out of them. But instantly that market gives you $1 billion, they expect you to do $1 billion deals. And so all these deals at 50 or 25 or $30 million were insignificant now to the future of the company. We had to do $1 billion, $2 billion deals to continue to meet the growth expectations that were out there. And because we could. And so I ended up taking the basket of crap. I ended up agreeing that I would take all of the residual bits and pieces that nobody else wanted and see what I could do with them. Either sort them out, flip them off, get rid of them, or turn them around and build them up. And one of them was an investment in a listed retirement development company, retirement village company called Prime Life. And we'd originally gone in there as white knights because this guy had said these really bad guys were coming and raping them, and we should need to come and protect them. And we got in there and found out that they were the good guys and he wasn't. So we ended up kind of getting stuck in there. And so we had 23% of it or something like that. And when we finally took management control, ASIC came and brought 23 litigations against us, against the company. And if any of you have had the pleasure of dealing with ASIC, they don't play fair, they don't wear gloves. It's fair enough. They can do anything they want, and you just smile. And so, fortunately, even though they had tied us to it, it was clear that this had all happened well long before we got there. So we put a guy in as CEO, first as troubleshooter and CEO, who was a great lawyer, and he worked it all out. The litigations were around raising funds without a prospectus, which they take a dim view of. And it was the guy who had built the company had sold down these villages into syndicates, each of which actually technically was a managed investment scheme, which hadn't been registered and hadn't, didn't qualify, wasn't licensed, all the rest of that stuff. So we were left holding the baby. So we spent 2 or 3 years turning it around. But at the same time, the retirement market was really beginning to boom, partly because the earliest of the baby boomers were thinking about where they were going to go, partly because Macquarie and several of the other finance houses worked out that retirement living, to buy into retirement living, is actually, it's a structured finance product. So when you develop a village, you build a villa and you actually sell it to somebody, but you retain a deferred management fee. So when they die or move out, and they actually die and move out, normally the same thing, but when they on-sell it to the next person, you get a quarter, you get a residual fee, a quarter of the sales price. And it happens for every time it rolls over going into the future. And so if you have 250 units in a village, and you have knowledge about the age of the and health of the people and the market value, you can pretty much estimate when your lump sums are going to come down the track. And the more units you have, so we used to describe it, this cash flow, which would be flat with a little spike like that, as a bed of nails. And the answer is, if you only have a couple, then the bed of nails is uncomfortable. But the more you have, the more smooth your cash flow is, because you've got lots of nails. So I was familiar with that. So we ended up buying up to about 12,000 of these things. And the more smooth the cash flows, the better you can discount them back to a present value, and that creates the value in whatever you're doing. And when we were first starting, vendors were selling their forward cash flows at a discount of 18%. That means that if you put $1 in today, you're going to earn 18% on it forever. That's the theory. So for investment bank, that looks pretty good. As we started buying, the prices went up and the discount came down. So the discount rates came down. They climbed up to about 9 or 10% at the end of the day, which is probably not unreasonable. So big office buildings will go at 4.5 or 5% cap rates. So 9 or 10% cap rate is pretty good. But what it meant was that everything we were buying along the way kept getting revalued as we buy it at 18 and it would go to 15. We'd buy one at 15, it would go to 12. We'd buy 12, it would go to 10. So what we ended up having was a very significant amount of unrealized value in this off-market trust that we created. So we rolled it together with Prime Life, sold it to a group of investors at about 8.5% discount rate, which they were happy to take, provided that was sustainable, which turned out not to be. So it was a tremendously interesting market, and I never actually thought that aged care and retirement would be particularly attractive businesses. And as I get towards that age, and I don't trust my children to choose my nursing home. It's a better business to be in. So one of the great things about B&B was that I could pretty much do whatever I liked. We had, as long as you delivered, whenever you had to draw down money, you had people to go through on credit committees and everything else, and guidelines. But I could be involved in charity work. I didn't have to show up for work at all, as long as me and my team delivered. So over the last 3 years there, my teams and I made about $140 million in profit for the bank. So they were quite happy for me to do whatever it was making the money. So it gave me a great deal of flexibility and freedom, and it was a fantastic company to work in. Really smart people and a lot of highly integrous people, very, very great people, and a handful that weren't. Who were running the place. Notice. So let me walk you through the timeline of 2008, really, which is where it all came unstuck for me. So we just bought Alinta in December 2007. Everybody took off for a nice, long holiday, and came back rewarded, refreshed. And beginning of February, this edict comes out. It says, okay, guys, you've got your budget. Every year it's got to go up and up and up. So the budget's really high this year, and hurdle rate, all that's all good. Oh yeah, business as usual, except you can't spend any money. So no expenses. Oh yeah, you can't put any debt on the balance sheet. And oh yeah, if you want equity, that's not going to happen either. But it's business as usual, right? And we're going, so that was the moment when, if I'd been really smart, I would have said, I'm out of here, right? Because there was actually a window in March when I could have sold my shares. And that would have been a really good outcome. As it turned out, I didn't. And those shares went from $36 to 53 cents to zero. And that hurt, a fair bit. Not just me, but it hurt me. So the beginning of 2008, it was clear that this was, that we were potentially in trouble. But the senior management, I guess of which I was part of the cohort, had such confidence in being able to adapt and evolve and overcome, the SAS quota, the SAS, what was it, their motto, thank you? Adapt, evolve, overcome. And we had been through different crises before, we'd been through different tax shifts and things before, and always been able to come through. And so I think there was this kind of general sense that, yeah, this could be really ugly, but we should be able to find our way through it. So it wasn't panic stations, but it was, when you start getting edicts like that from management about, go your hardest, but you're not going to be able to do any business. So we started pulling back, and the guy that I was working with on the listed fund was called Babcock and Brown Communities, which is a retirement fund. And we had an aged care component in it. And basically, the investors loved the retirement villages, didn't like the aged care. Aged care is like formal registered nurses, and people, and the government pays most of that. So we thought, well, maybe what we could do is spin a fund off from that fund and get wholesale funding into aged care, leave the retirement investors there, take the aged care with us, and start doing it again. And we at the time, we were also looking at aged care funds in Europe and also in the States. So we were traveling a fair bit, getting that all done. But it became increasingly clear that it just wasn't going to happen. That investors were shy, and all this stuff with the hedge funds and the press, and Babcock and Brown was really on the nose. Just this like a general concern, over-geared, and then all this kind of insinuation about improper action and stuff, none of which, really was ever proven, or ever actually pursued. But in the middle of a crisis like that, it doesn't matter. It's the rumors that'll kill you, not the fact. So we started to move into kind of April, May, and 3 months of doing nothing, people getting gratuity, realizing they're not going to get a bonus this year, much less a job. Businesses started getting closed. The banks were putting a lot of pressure and forcing asset sales, even though they hadn't formally exercised security or anything like that. So you might be in breach of a covenant, or they might think you're in breach of a covenant. And so in the funds, they started forcing asset sales. Well, forcing asset sales in an illiquid market, when all of the assets we had were 30-year assets, so pipelines, power stations, wind farms, retirement villages, they don't trade overnight. It's not like selling an apartment or a share or something like that. You have to. So the buyers also had no access to debt because the debt was all dried up. So what happened was the only buyers around were cashed-up hedge funds who were going to buy it at 24 cents on the dollar. They were never going to do anything else. But the banks were happy to hammer that home. And as soon as they crystallized the sale, it would breach the covenant. Because that loss on sale goes through the profit and loss. And not only the profit and loss of the fund, but the profit and loss of the parent company. The ripple effect's extraordinary. There's no way really around that. When it starts to go, it just spins. Like that, that water movement when you pull the flush. So when we got into June, I think May, June was the toughest time of my life, because I was frustrated because I could see that there were actions that we could take that could save the company, but it required actually to stand up, somebody to stand up and make the decision, take the action, and it was going to be painful, but it's better to survive without a leg than not to survive, right? You need to make those decisions early, but it just wasn't happening. And I was very disappointed because the senior managers, the divisional managers, and the guys on the board, in general terms, they either went, well, the CEO got really sick, so he became like a rabbit in the headlights. He became like a possum on a rail. He just couldn't move. He was like, you know, he got clinical depression, but he wouldn't step aside, and he would sit. Somebody would ask him a question in the meeting. He'd literally sit for 10 or 15 minutes staring at the table without saying anything. And nobody knew whether the meeting was over or, you know, what do we do? And they just didn't know what to do, and it was really getting bad. And then some of the senior guys began, okay, well, this is our opportunity to take over. So all the backbiting and the politics and the power plays, so they could end up at running the show. And you know, a couple of guys fancied themselves as Nicholas Moore from Corey Bank. You know, I'm going to be the next golden boy. And the press again just hounded, just day by day. You know, all these little snarky gossip columns, and just, you know, and even if there had been a shred of truth about it, and there wasn't, for the sake of the headline, to trash the lives of, you know, several thousand employees by then, it's just, you know, I just don't get it. But anyway, it's part of the game, I suppose. So then we had margin calls on staff, so individual people were having to remortgage their house at a time when banks were lending so they could pay off the margin calls that were coming on the stock that was now worthless or worth much less. We had, you know, businesses being sold, firings or retrenchments every day, every week around, you know. They stopped even having goodbye parties for people because it was just like every week. You know, and in fact, people just resorted to sort of drinking at 4 o'clock. Most days actually. You know, and some people sitting around with absolutely nothing to do but feeling the pressure, and other people working, you know, 15, 18-hour days on projects that they knew were stupid, that were never going to work, that someone had assigned them to do, but they were terrified about losing the job, so they worked on it. You know, just an awful, awful situation. Senior staff gone totally missing. They were in meetings all day, either negotiating with banks or with their lawyers or plotting or, you know, it's just ridiculous. So there's no direction, no instructions, no communication, just this vacuum of everything except kind of fear and anxiety and darkness. It was really bad. And then finally, in October '08, I left after we had sold control of the fund that I was responsible for. We sold it to Lend-Lease, who raped and pillaged and got an amazing price. And then there was nothing really left for me to stick around, so I got retrenched. Actually, turned out to be I was one of the lucky ones that got retrenched, because later on they ran out of money to pay retrenchments. It's like, you know, bad news. So I'll tell you a couple of stories and go through some of the lessons or some of my learnings around it, but just this pressure, fear, anxiety, concern, you know, this deflation, this growing into bitterness, anger sometimes, it led to poor behavior. There were a whole bunch of affairs that started happening, you know, sexual liaisons, sometimes at work. You go, what's that? Like, it's, you know, you think you're on an airplane that's going to crash, and you've got, you know, it's like, not going to be held responsible for it. What's this? You know? And even in the middle of this, we had some classics where there was a board meeting early on in about February or March, and some guys on the board were just completely out of touch. But everybody knew that this board meeting was about how do we cut costs, how do we, you know, what businesses do we have to flog, who do we have to retrench, how do we do it? Everybody knew that, right? The chairman sent his PA in a taxi to Balmain to buy his favorite gluten-free muffins and bring it back. And everybody in the company knew that. And the guy who was the Japanese property thing was flying to Melbourne after the board meeting to go golfing with a client, one of our investors, and he forgot his golf club. So he flew them first class in a seat down from Japan. And the whole company knew this on the day that they're going through this outrageous cost-cutting exercise. It was just, you know, and so everybody is really cynical. All the staff are just going, you know, this is really bad. So a lot of poor behavior in the middle of it. So let me go now to some kind of learnings that we've, some I followed and some I wish I had. But the first thing would be to step back. Try to step out of it. Not see it coming, because if you can, it's great, but most people can't see it coming because you're head down working. But accept advice from family and friends. Read the broker reports and believe them. Read the papers. Sometimes it's true. They certainly if it's not true, they can still cause the downfall. So it's a cause and effect thing. Look at the commentary around it. Listen to the critics of the company. Don't hold so true to the company because out of loyalty that you refuse to hear any criticism, because that will hamper you from being able to make decisions down the track. We had enough arrogance to think that it can't happen in my company. It can. Get past that and believe that it can happen to your company, and you need to think about what the implications for you are in that process. True believers lose every time. Sorry, it's just the way it is. It's self-preservation includes a bit of cynicism and objectivity. So step back, move out. So the second point would be take some action. The first to move actually get reasonable deals, because even the management at that time don't really know how bad it's going to be. So the people who got out in January, February, March of 2008 actually got to keep the shares, actually got a bit of a payout, maybe not much, but they were unrestricted as they walked away. They sold the shares at $18 or $12, something like that, instead of 53 cents. But the longer you wait there, the worse it gets, and the worse options, the fewer options you have, and the worse the deal that you're going to get is. Cut your losses. Cut your losses. Go early, and margin calls. If you have, really sit back and think, should I let this margin call go? Should I let them sell the stock up and pay off the debt? My advice to you is yes. Most margin calls are non-recourse, so they can't come back to you, only other than pressure. My advice to you is if you're in that situation, you've got company stock that's being paid you in bonuses, you have loans against you, something like that, let it go. Take the loss. They can't come back to your home or your person or anything like that. Take the loss and walk away. If I'd done that, we would have been in a significantly different position. What I did was run around to my banker, plead, raise money against my house, pay down the margin calls on stock that was then plummeting. And so I was keep chasing it. So I kept chasing the margins, kept chasing the price. It was bad. But you got to take some action. You have to do something. Inertia is soul destroying. Inertia will kill you. That feeling of out of control or out of helplessness, you always have control over yourself. There's nothing stopping you. Walk away. Walk away. If that's the worst thing that happens, you walk away, you find a job the next day. But take some action. Be in control of your life. Be in control of the decisions that are happening around you. And even if you don't actually decide to walk away, but you've gone through the process and worked out that you can, gives you empowerment. It gives you a sense of perspective that you can't have otherwise. Number 3 is that pressure will bring out the best and the worst in people. And I'm sure if you're on an airplane and it's going down, there are some people who are behaving really well and some people are behaving really badly. Well, this is just exactly like that. Some stand tall, some take responsibility, some go out of their ways to communicate, some allay people's fears, some do the right thing every time, and others don't. Others get shown up for having an agenda of self-interest, of self-motivation, of how can I use this for my promotion, how can I get the most out of this, how can I walk away. There were guys, I'll give you an example in a moment, but people do things out of fear or under pressure that they would never do otherwise. And do not be surprised by how poorly people can respond. I saw stuff which I was horrified by from people that I respected up until then, anyway. And don't be one of them. The day that I knew that I was leaving B&B happened in June, and the guy that I was working for was a really smart guy. I worked with him off and on for 15 years. I thought I knew him really well. And he's nothing if not logical. You know, he could be heartless and all those kind of things, but he was always logical. And he started doing things which looked to me like he was either having a breakdown or I didn't know what was going on because they were not logical. He was making announcements which were hurting the share price of the funds we were trying to sell. He was in negotiations with potential buyers for the funds. He was messing it up so we weren't getting the highest prices. And I'm going, I don't get this. And that was causing me a great deal of anxiety. My trigger, I know if I'm not sleeping well and I wake up in the middle of the night and my chest is tight, that's how I know I'm under a lot of pressure. That's when I go, okay, I got to do something about this. But I finally woke up and I figured it out. I figured out that this guy was negotiating to leave the company and take with him the management rights to the two funds that we were trying to sell. And that would be his exit. That would be his, and I figured it out. So I went to the managing director and I said, look, you know, I've worked with these guys. I've worked with these guys for 12, 13 years, right? Go to him and I say, look, I just don't get what he's been doing. The only explanation I can think of is that he's been negotiating to take these two funds as his exit package. And I saw this look go across the managing director's face. And I go, you bastard. You've known all the way along and you're negotiating, you're playing into it. You're playing into it. And that moment, I knew that's it for me at B&B. You know, I don't care what happens. There is no long-term future in this company. And so as soon as I saw that, I go, okay, well, I better back off because this guy's obviously complicit. And I wonder how many other people are doing the same things with other divisions. So I just left it. But at that point, I mean, actually as a result of my intervention, he was told to back off, which he wasn't very happy about, and ended up taking it out on me for the rest of the time I was there. But that's okay. That's okay. But you know, that story was a turning point for me. That moment in time that said, all the loyalty I had, all the belief that we could turn it around, all the leave myself here and not cut and run because I thought I was doing the right thing by the company, all that's out the window. That's all rubbish. You know, the companies do not return loyalty to you. And that's a good thing to remember. So that was the year that I turned 50, and we had planned for a walk as a family to go climb Kilimanjaro. And it was coming up in mid-July until mid-August, and my wife would say, oh, do you think we should go? You know, everything might happen. And I'm going, this is exactly the time we need to go, because there's nothing we can do here, and it's an awful situation, and I'm just as happy to be out of the country when whatever happens, happens. So we went, we had a wonderful time in Kilimanjaro and Zanzibar and Serengeti, and just had a great time as a family, did a little bit of aid work, and then we were just in Africa together. And by the time I got back, it was basically all over. The writing was on the wall. Some people were working on projects to resurrect the company or sell this, and they were all completely ridiculous. And the benefit of coming back in from Africa, you gotta be joking. Why don't you get to work these guys to death? And there was no way knowing this idea is gonna work. Why don't you just retrench them now and let them go? You're just gonna kill these guys. So there's a few principles that I wanted to outline as part of these learnings. One is do the right thing. The only thing you have to carry forward is your reputation. And people do remember. They remember how you acted when the aircraft was going down. They remember how you acted under pressure. And that can either go really well for you for the rest of your working life in Sydney, or it could go really badly for you for the rest of your working life in Sydney. And it does make a difference. And you can make lifelong bonds of respect, or the opposite. And there are senior members of B&B who will never work in Australia again. But there are also people who I would walk over broken glass to help at the same time. So reach out to other people who are hurting worse than you are. You know, try to the junior buddies in our division where they're working so hard and they still thought, you know, it's all going to happen. And I'm going. I tell you what. I actually went to the chief operating officer and I said, look, give me something, because what they said was, oh, Andrew, we're going to hold you back in case we don't get a successful selling of the management of these two funds. We'll give you an opportunity to put together a management buyout. Well, that was complete rubbish. They never had any intention of doing that. They just wanted to sideline me. So I went to him and I said, look, I'm gonna do two things. Unless you give me something proper to do, I'm going to do two things. One of them is I'm going to prepare for my life after B&B, because it's a matter of time. So I'm going to build a business or do something post B&B, and I need you to know that I'm going to do it on your time, unless you give me something to do. And the second thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go around. There are 25 or 30 young people working who have been working in the company for less than 2 or 3 years since we listed. They don't get any retrenchment payout because they've only been there 18 months or 2 years, whatever it is. You're working them like dogs. You're going to dump them at Christmas time when all these things happen, and they're going to be put into a terrible job market with no payout, with Christmas coming up, and you're being heartless about how you're doing this. And what I'm going to do, unless you tell me otherwise, you're going to be something useful to you, I'm going to go and find them job offers from other companies. So I spent the next 6 weeks or so, 8 weeks, knocking on all my peers who worked at Macquarie Bank and AMP Capital and Investec and all the other investment banks around town, investment houses, saying, what are the people you're looking for? Tell me about this. Oh, there's a couple of really good young guys. I'd really like to recommend them to you. And they said, yep, bring it on. And so I said, what I'll do is, I can't do anything other than broker, so I'm going to give them your number, and if they call, they call. If they don't, they don't. But at the end of the day, I got offers for about 25 young people to be placed. Now, I still don't actually know how many actually took it up. But two things. I was able to come back into the company, take these people aside, say, here, call this person. They have a job. It's in AMP Capital, and it's a good job in infrastructure. They really need someone like you as a modeler. I recommend you call a guy, but I'm just going to leave it to it. But that was able to give them hope that there's life after what they're doing. It was able to give them a bit of comfort that there are still jobs out there and that kind of stuff. What it actually did, which it was an unintended benefit, was it set me up in a relationship with all these people running all these different investment banks who I'd known for 20, 25 years, but it reestablished a relationship with them that I'm now able to call them and do business, and they're happy to take my call because the reason I was going to see them wasn't about me. It wasn't a selfish motive. It was trying to help out these people. So there's bringing hope and doing the right thing to people. Wins you friends, as well as it does good things for you, and it also can just bring a little ray of hope into the lives of some of the people around you. Second principle is do not hold on to or grieve for the money. In a meltdown, you're going to lose. Right? You either lose the stock you had, or you lose your payout, or you lose your job, or you lose something. But everybody loses. Everybody loses something. If you make a decision based on the money, it's bound to be a wrong one. And the chances are you lose the money anyway. So I guess I can tell you this. You're not going to tell my wife, right? So when we left a lot of money on the table. And in our minds, we had pledged that to give away to the poor. So I was kind of raving at God, going, "What were you thinking? That money was for the poor." So when I actually left, my wife said to me, "Andrew, we're going to have a period of mourning for the money we've lost, and we're going to get over it, and then we're going to move on." And I'm going, "Yes, dear, that's a really good idea." But it actually turned out to be awesome because we just had this we were allowed to be angry, in denial, regretful, and you finally end up accepting it. So we went for about a week, 10 days, and we go, okay, it's over. We're never going to mention it again. We're never going to live in regret. We're never going to look back, thinking, oh, what about all that? We're just going to move on. So an organized period of mourning around what you've lost is good. It's part of the moving on process. So point number 1 is do the right thing. Point number 2, don't hold on to or grieve for the money. 3, don't internalize it. Don't internalize all the rubbish that's happening in your company, and don't put it on yourself. Share it with your friends. Share it with your spouse or your family. Talk about it. The isolation will kill you. If you can't talk about it, if you can't express whatever's going on, it'll eat you up. You have to talk to people. You have to unload. You have to find people who can take it and let you vent, and then you'll be fine. But you have to share it. You can't internalize it. Depression, anger, anxiety, sleeplessness, it will kill you. Don't let it happen. And it also makes for really bad decision making when it comes to the time when you have to make decisions. Number 4, maintain healthy routines throughout. Be fit. Be healthy. Be stay running or exercise, whatever it is you do. Ballroom dancing, when we girls in our group did. It's great stress relief. It just is, knocking yourself out of physical exercise is just great stress relief. And then finally, when it's over, take a break. Even if you have a job that starts the next day, take a break. You've got to unwind. You've got to process what's going on. Get rid of it before you can start fresh. Otherwise just carry it with you. So keep it in perspective is really important. That stepping back. And just to remind you that the fear of something is always worse than the reality. The reality never proves to be as bad as you thought it was going to be. So just try to remember that when you're in the middle of it. And I don't want to sound like motherhood, but your attitude will make or break it for you. So you can, what I recommend you try to do is embrace this as a learning experience if you're right in the middle of it, and an opportunity. You can only do that when you're confident about your general future and your ability to find another job and those kind of things. But try to think about what's going on, learn the lessons, write them down, not just for yourself, but also so that you can relay them in future interviews, because people are going to want to talk about what you went through in a job interview. And having a perspective on it and having lived through it actually gives you, marketability at the next role as well. But the attitude will save you or kill you. So prioritizing things, getting things right, spend time with family. If somebody says, no, I want you to work till 10 o'clock tonight, say, give me a break, mate. The company's going down the toilet. Right? What is the difference in me working 2 hours? It's my mother's birthday, I'm going to go. What are you going to do, fire me? It's like, what's the worst that can happen? Put things in perspective and build your priorities. We live in an amazing country, just a blessed country, full of fresh air and freedoms, and the freedom to get another job, and the freedom to withhold your labor, and the freedom to, to start again. And you just got to keep remembering, you guys are young, and you've got lots of future ahead of you. So when you're in the middle of the burnout, it's not the end of the world. Just that stepping back mentality, that kind of try to look at, always look on the bright side. But I would say, just in closing then, that you can start getting prepared for these kind of things now. And I urge you to have a rounded life. I urge you to have lots of different interests, not just work and not just one thing. Family, charitable interests, hobbies, fitness, all these kind of, make it rounded. Make your life rounded so that you're not so reliant on one thing that when it looks shaky, it undermines your whole world. I think that's what happened to the managing director. Work was his whole focus, making money for his community and recognition. That was his whole self-esteem. And when that started to crumble, there was nothing left. And he actually went into clinical depression. So lead a rounded life. Lead a rounded life. For me, faith is a really big thing. So having that faith puts you in a different perspective. Having the faith gives you a kind of an eternal perspective that this is a momentary thing. It's going to pass. And that you can move on and still thrive and survive, and it's all going to be good. Sun will come up tomorrow. So get your fulfillment from stuff outside of work. And just finally, life is short. Be careful about how much of yourself you pour into a job. It's good to be loyal, it's good to be dedicated, all that kind of stuff. But there's a difference between being dedicated and committed and investing yourself into it. And I encourage you to keep a portion back so that you have a life outside of the work that you're doing. So that stuff that's important should remain important outside. Your work is not going to return loyalty. And when it doesn't, that can be devastating. So Benjamin Franklin wrote, many people die at 25, but they're not buried till they're 75. And I'll leave you with this one thought from Warren Buffett. Don't wait until later to do the job you really want. That would be like leaving sex for old age. So thank you guys. I hope that...
deserve the standing ovation. That was fantastic. Yeah, I'll open the questions up to on the floor.
So I actually talked for a lot longer than I expected.
That's right. Cool.
Yeah.
It's interesting what you said. I mean, a lot of it's actually timeless as well. If you think back to the Enron days, a lot of the things, if you watch the documentary, the two smartest guys in the room, were replicated through the GFC. And I mean, from your thoughts, it was interesting when Alan Moss left Macquarie Bank for personal reasons. I almost thought back to, I think it was Jeff Skilling who left 12 months before, and I thought, is there some sort of resemblance? Do you think Alan may have had some sort of insight into what was coming from his position? I'm not saying underhand.
Yeah. But I really like Alan. I got a lot of time for him.
Yeah.
And I suspect that he was just smart. That he thought, the world is going to change. I've had a great run of 15 or 18 or 20 years, whatever it was, as CEO. The company's prepared to take the next step. David Clark, who was his kind of chairman, was getting sick. I think he thought that was the perfect timing. But good on him.
But yeah, it was perfect timing.
First of all, I'm in margin lending and I issue margin calls, so now I'm really considering a change in career. Thank you. If you had a time machine and you could travel back to being, mid-20s again and give advice to yourself, what skills would you tell yourself to develop and what tools would you aspire to gain?
That's a good question. The greatest skill you can have is adaptability, because you just don't know what's going to happen. And the world is accelerating. The world is not slowing down. The rate of change is not slowing down, it's speeding up. And your ability to handle change, to absorb it, is going to be the key to your success. And technology alone, we were just talking about this earlier, technology alone is going to change everything. I don't know how it's going to change it, but you guys probably do. I think the one thing that I would do is I would get my finances in order early. I would get, I would work really hard to raise capital and invest it for the benefit of other major not-for-profits, to try and change the world but using capital. So right now I'm kind of trying to use my forces for good and not for evil. And that's kind of what it is. And it's great fun, pays like crap, but if we can crack it, we're going to see tens of thousands of people benefit from the outcome. So that's what I'm doing. Just use the skills and experience you have, try to change the direction. Maybe just have one more. Yeah?
Yeah. One of the comments you made earlier was that you saw that there was a freeze on spending. So I presume no taxis, no going out, no executive spending. I was going to say, companies, I worked in IT and I was in the IT wreck in 2001 and the same thing happened. And I started to notice that the similar patterns appeared. So when I work for a company and they turn around and say, no more of this spending or that spending, I know it's time to get out. Have you noticed that in any other way or any other place? That, to me, is a very early sign when they cut down on expenses. That, to me, that is the first sign of right time to jump ship.
So, a couple of different answers to that. First is that B&B did need to cut down on expenses. We had, I think, at reception on level 37 of Chifley Tower, we had 17 people employed there in reception, doing coffees and catering, and that, we needed to cut down on expenses. The stuff that scared me though wasn't around taxis or flying economy instead of business. The stuff that scared me was you can't spend money on legal fees to negotiate correctly around these transactions. That's scary, when it's the core business that they're cutting back expenditure on. So I haven't, this is only kind of 2 or 3 years ago for me, and I haven't really been in any other situations to observe that. But I do know that, as you point out, these things are cyclical, and the best thing you can do is be a student of what's happened already, because it's inevitably gonna come back again. I don't know if you ever watched a show called Cheers. Remember Cheers? Woody Harrelson was this kind of slow guy behind the bar. And somebody quoted this great quote, which is, if you fail to learn from history, you are doomed to repeat it. That great quote. And Woody goes, I've learned about mathematics as well.